Rain fell in steady sheets, turning the Chicago streets into glistening rivers under flickering streetlights. Ethan sat hunched on a cold metal bench, his coat soaked through, barely offering protection from the chill that settled deep into his bones. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened his worn wallet. Inside, a single, crumpled dollar bill. That was it. Days had passed since he'd eaten a proper meal, but he'd kept that dollar like a last piece of hope, unsure if he'd need it for food, a call, or maybe just the feeling that he still had something. He looked up at the people rushing by, their umbrellas like shields, their eyes fixed forward, avoiding the reality of people like him. Then he saw her. Across the street stood a young woman, maybe 19, soaked to the skin, her bare feet pressed to the cold pavement. She wore no coat, just a thin hoodie that clung to her shoulders in the rain. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, and she leaned against a lamppost as though it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes darted around, not begging, not crying, just lost, empty, and alone. Ethan's gaze lingered. There was something painfully familiar about the way she stood, about the quiet in her desperation. He knew that kind of silence, that kind of hunger, not just for food, but for dignity. And suddenly, the dollar in his hand didn't feel like survival. It felt like a choice. Ethan stood slowly, joints aching from the cold bench and damp clothes. The dollar felt weightless in his hand, but heavy in his heart. Every step across the rain-slick street felt deliberate, like the universe was holding its breath. The young woman noticed him approaching and straightened up, wary but too tired to move away. Her cardboard sign, smudged from the rain, read, "Just need to get home." He stopped in front of her and held out the dollar. "It's not much," he said quietly, his voice hoarse, "but maybe it'll help." She stared at the bill, then at him, confused. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "You look like you need it more than I do." He chuckled softly, but there was no joy in it. "Maybe. But I know what it's like to stand where you are, hungry, cold, invisible. No one should feel that." She took the dollar hesitantly, her hand trembling. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," he replied, the rain running down his face like silent tears. "Kindness isn't about what you have. It's what you give when you have almost nothing left." They stood there for a moment, both soaking, both silent. Then she whispered a shaky, "Thank you," clutching the dollar like it was gold. He nodded and turned to walk away, unaware that this small act, one worn dollar handed over in the rain, had just set something extraordinary in motion. Later that evening, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Ethan found shelter beneath the awning of a nearby diner, watching through fogged glass as customers laughed and shared meals. His stomach groaned at the smell of fresh bread and sizzling bacon, but he didn't move. He knew he couldn't afford even a cup of coffee. A kind-faced waitress noticed him from inside. She came out with a small paper bag and handed it to him without a word, just a warm smile. "It's not much," she said, "but it's fresh." Ethan accepted it gratefully, nodding with quiet appreciation. Just as he unwrapped the bread, headlights swept across the sidewalk. A small car pulled up to the curb, and from it stepped the same girl, dry now, wearing clean clothes and holding an umbrella. She looked almost unrecognizable. "Hey," she called softly. Ethan blinked in surprise. She walked over, a shy smile on her face. "I've been looking for you." He stood, confused. "You all right?" She nodded. "I need to tell you something. That moment earlier, I wasn't really homeless." Ethan's brows furrowed. "I'm a student," she explained, "a psychology major. I was filming a social experiment on kindness, seeing who would stop. Do you know what's funny? The camera had just shut off when you came." Ethan stayed silent. "No one else gave me anything," she continued, eyes welling up. "But you did, with nothing left for yourself. That wasn't an act. That was real." And in that moment, everything changed. The next morning, Ethan sat at a small kitchen table in an apartment far warmer than any place he'd been in months. The young woman, her name was Lily, had insisted he come home with her for the night. She gave him dry clothes, a hot shower, and a warm bed on her couch. Now, over steaming coffee and scrambled eggs, she listened intently as he told her his story. He spoke slowly, voice raw. About the hardware store he once owned with his wife. How the pandemic shut it down. How cancer took her months later. How the bills, the grief, and the weight of everything broke him. He'd lost the store. The house. Himself. Lily's eyes filled with tears. I can't believe no one helped you. Ethan just shrugged. Some did. But not enough to change anything. You stop asking after a while. She looked down, then suddenly stood and grabbed her phone. I want to try something, she said. She took a photo of Ethan, him holding that same paper bag from the diner, looking hesitant but hopeful. She posted it online with a simple caption. This man gave me his last dollar in the rain. Let's give him a second chance. Neither of them expected what happened next. Within hours, the post was shared thousands of times. Donations began pouring in. Local news reached out. Strangers wrote messages of love, support, and shared pain. The world had seen his kindness, and was ready to return it tenfold. 1 year later, the Second Chance Coffee sign gleamed proudly above a freshly painted brick storefront in the heart of the same Chicago neighborhood where Ethan once sat cold and forgotten. A small crowd gathered out front, murmuring with excitement. News cameras rolled. Neighbors smiled. At the center of it all stood Ethan, no longer hunched, no longer hidden, but proud, clean-shaven, and dressed in a crisp button-down shirt. Lily stood beside him, her smile radiant. What had started as a social experiment became a partnership, and a deep friendship that changed both of their lives. As Ethan held the oversized scissors and looked at the red ribbon, his voice trembled with emotion. A year ago, I gave away my last dollar. I thought it was the end of everything. But it turned out to be the beginning. The crowd clapped as the ribbon fell. Inside, the cafe buzzed with warmth. Soft jazz played, mugs clinked, and on one corner wall hung a framed photo of Ethan sitting in the rain that night, holding that paper bag. Beneath it, a small plaque read. Kindness is never wasted. Sometimes, it's all you need to change a life. Every Friday, the cafe gave out free coffee to anyone in need. Ethan called it Dollar Day, in honor of the moment everything turned. He looked around at the joyful faces, the comfort, the light, and for the first time in years, he felt not just seen, but whole. The dollar was gone. But hope was back, and it was overflowing.